I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
Sounds-
There's a lot of office buildings that are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're live.
Nice.
The only thing is just keep that in front of you so we can hear you loud and clear. You're kind of tall. There. Cool. All right. Fuck. Well, I appreciate your time.
Oh,
We met actually not too long ago through a mutual friend, and you met him. I guess your kids were going to St. Barnhagen.
yeah, Sam Barnhagen. I met him pretty much like right away.
Yeah.
We had like a birthday party that he was invited to right as they started Barnhagen, and like we got to this birthday party and opened our doors, and Seifert was there, opened his doors as well, and like right away he's like a super social guy,
Yeah.
super outgoing, which is really nice. But yeah, it's always nice when you like start in new places and you have those individuals that are like outgoing people that they aren't afraid to like reach out and be like, hey, how's it going? And like joke around a bit or whatever. It makes, I think, in any workspace so much nicer when there's people that are like talking to you and they're not all just like hiding away from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's and props to Sievert, but I think he's one of the more rare in terms of like culture here. I think people tend to be a little bit more reserved.
Yeah.
I mean, in the States and Canada, everyone's quite social, but here, I think he's kind of like an outlier, unfortunately. Because I understand what you're saying. Like if you're in a new environment, whether it's, at school events or, a social event, work event, like you want people to like, be social. And I think that's maybe not the kind of typical way people are here. Is that kind of what you noticed as well?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I thought he was, when he told me that he had lived in the US, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's why. That's probably why that he's more outgoing. That's for sure. In my years of experience in Norway, it's like most people are a little bit more reserved. And that's just like the culture here. And that's fine. It's also like, in a way, it's kind of nice because you also don't have to be like that either. Because I know like back home, if you're at the grocery store, like in Canada, at the grocery store, you're like saying hi to people that you like barely know. You're, oh, what are you doing? Like all this chit chat, which is like nice, but it's also sometimes it's a bit like you just want to
Could
get
be too
out of
much.
there. Yeah, you want to get out of there. You want to go home. So here it's like just people are just like, I'm just doing my business and don't care what you're doing. I'm just gonna continue to do my stuff.
Because you've been here in Norway for how long now?
So I was here for 2 years here in Stavanger, and then we left for 2 years, and then I was in Lillehammer for 2, and now this is my second year back in Stavanger. So 6 years.
So cumulatively.
Yeah. About 6 years in total.
So going back to the whole topic about like culture, do you prefer like if you were on the fence and had a decision to make, do you prefer the culture in terms of how they are here socially, or do you prefer it back home?
Oh, back home for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say back home a majority of the time. It's just in those small instances when you are like tired from work or whatever, then it is nice. But I would say it's like when I go back to Canada, Vancouver, when I'm like walking my dog or like out of the grocery store, it's like very nice because people are like, hey, how you doing? And like, they're like, hi. Like it like gives you a little bit more energy when people are like upbeat and social.
You kind of get that like that kind of neighborhood feel. I mean, you could be in like a new city in Canada or in the US, but if you have a smile and you're respectful to people, it just feels like you're in another neighborhood. Whereas here, it just feels, again, I'm not knocking on the Norwegians, like I always, there's a tendency to kind of feel like you're throwing them under a bus, but I'm really not. I'm just kind of, we're talking about the differences because you and I are from different areas, And I think I agree with you. I think I would prefer the default of kind of how we have it back home, and then have, obviously the few folks that are, maybe not as social, but little tip, I learned in the gym, if you don't want to talk to people, just put on your headphones, and people usually leave you alone. But yeah, that I really do. And you've been here 6 years. My wife is Norwegian. I kind of went back and forth, so I haven't spent as much time as you have in Scandinavia. I just spent 2 years in Denmark. But yeah, that's tough, man, because we're just fucking outgoing people, like we like socializing. We like, small talk, as annoying as that may be. But here, small talk is considered kind of like disrespectful and rude, in a lot of ways. Of course, you play the American Canada card, they kind of give you a little free pass. But in general, they're like, just let me be.
Yeah, for sure. I think that in my experience, most Norwegians, like, they aren't embarrassed of the fact that the culture is like that. Like I think some of them see how it is when they go to the US and stuff. And I'm sure they're like, oh, that's like nice. But I think a lot of them are like, yeah, this is how it is. And like, we all like it like that. That's what they're used to. So I think they like almost are proud of it in a way. Like when I talk to people, they aren't very like, yeah, like embarrassed about it or shameful. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think same thing with my experience. I kind of share the same experience, but I have to say the people that have visited America or Canada or have spent time there or lived there have a different view. Like they like being in America because of that aspect. I found out that the folks that haven't visited the U.S. or spent much time there or in Canada, like you said, they're okay with that here. But I've noticed that the people who have spent time in the U.S. like it there, like that aspect of how the culture and the social is. 'Cause, I mean, it's just a little bit warmer, you know. So I don't know if that's been your experience or not. But
yeah, for sure. I think, and I'm sure that it will kind of change here. I'm sure, especially in like Stavanger and Oslo, where there's more foreigners. It's like I think that with the more foreigners that come in and the more Norwegians that are traveling abroad, I think that culture will naturally kind of shift. Not saying that it will be completely the same as Canada, the US, but I think that it will, like people will be a little bit more like easily outgoing, let's say easily outgoing and like to people they don't know and in the street. And of course there are those people, the unique small amount of Norwegians that are like that, but I think
the Sievers of the world of Norway, that you can't shut up.
that will, I think that will grow, grow.
Yeah, for better or worse. I mean, like I said, when you go to a different country or different area of the world, it's not that they're they're not weird. It's just different.
Yeah,
that's why I always say, like, I've traveled quite a bit, and when you go to a new place, people say, "Oh, that's weird." It's like, no, that's not weird. It's weird to you, but it's just different.
Yeah,
and again, better for better or worse. So I think that's a good kind of way to, especially because we're not from here and we've migrated here. Like this is where we reside now. So we have to get acclimated. We can't just try to stay in our own ecosystem like we have in the U.S. and try to bring it here. Just I don't believe in that philosophy. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I went to like Tokyo.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to experience Tokyo and like their culture, and I would say like it could be weird, but weird doesn't have to be like a negative thing. It's just something that's different, like you said. But that's like kind of the whole point of going and doing that stuff and like traveling to wherever country it is. It's like it's different, and that's why you go. It's kind of boring if you just went like around Vancouver and everything was just Vancouver. It's really boring.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I was really fascinated. It's always like a breath of fresh air when I meet a fellow North American, Canadian American, Australian. We kind of have, you kind of feel like at home. You hear the accent, and you're like, oh fuck, okay, like we can connect. So I was really excited to meet you. And then obviously you had mentioned that, or you had shared that you played professional hockey, and on this podcast, I just like to talk to people that I have no fucking idea what they do, that way it gives me an opportunity to learn and kind of, hear your story. So, could you kind of back up a little bit and like, I know, were you born and raised in Vancouver, or can you tell me a little bit about how you grew up? And
born and raised in Vancouver. I got 3 older brothers, and in Canada, hockey is just like massive. It's the biggest sport, and everyone's kind of playing hockey. Everyone's watching hockey, the NHL, Vancouver Canucks. And my dad is from England, so he had like zero hockey background, zero hockey experience, or really athletic experience in that manner. But my older brothers, they played hockey, and that's like they're about 4 and 5 years older than me. And I was like in love with them, and they were my heroes growing up. So when they'd go to practice, I'd go and I'd be like watching and like admiring what they were doing and stuff. And like I played hockey as well, but I was like a rink rat, and in the way of when they had a practice or a game, I would bring my gear.
Oh, really? Wow.
Just in case they needed players or if they needed a goalie, because they'd have like the teams have like a set of goalie pads that the coach would bring to the game, and maybe they'd rotate or whatever at a younger age. But so I'd go and like walk in there with them, and they hated it so much because it's like their little, I was like chubby kid. Like they're my little chubby brother, like following me around everywhere. But I would go and I'd ask the coach, like, do you need a goalie? Do you need players? And they just knew me by my name, and they're like, yeah, we'll let you know. Just wait. And I'd just like stand in the hallway and like wait for them to see if they needed guys. And So from a really young age, I was like really enthusiastic about hockey, really motivated to just be on the ice at any level.
So what age did you start? What age was this around?
I mean, I started skating around 4.
Oh, wow.
Probably around 4 years old, which is like probably the normal age. And then this kind of mindset I had was probably more from like 6 to 10 years old, maybe even a little bit older than that.
Yeah.
But like hockey was just such a big deal to me, and my brothers played and they were like, okay. But because I was always playing with them and like playing street hockey, we played street hockey like every day.
Yeah.
It was every day we were playing. So my like success in hockey is 100% because of them and like playing with them and playing with older kids and stuff. And yeah, so that was my like upbringing in hockey. And then I was like good athletically, having older brothers. But I was like a really chubby kid. I was like pretty big, pretty chubby, and like
I can't imagine being chubby now, but
yeah, not really like a long distance runner by any means, but I was always like athletic in like short distances. Like I was very fast at sprinting if it was under 50 meters. And then around, I want to say like around 14 years old, that's when I like made my first like AAA team. So that's like the best there is in that region. So at 14, I made the AAA team. And my parents were like so proud, and like obviously I was really happy.
oh yeah.
And about that age is when my brothers like started to respect me or like even like me or like like
They're like, oh shit, he's actually fucking good.
yeah, like, oh okay, like we'll like learn his name basically. So around 14 started getting better, and basically from then on it was always like I was the last person to make the team. I was like the last cut that made it. I'm a defenseman, so there'd be like typically 7 defensemen on a team, and I was always like that 7th guy. And that's kind of how it worked from when I was 14 on that AAA team, like last one in, and then over the year just kind of climbing up. And the next year when it would be like a harder team to make, same thing, like last guy in, climbing up. And I kind of just did that for like 10 years.
So you were barely making it at a high level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were okay. Yeah.
Yeah, at a high level, I was barely making it. And at 16 years old, you go in Canada, you can go like the CHL, which is like in the Western part, it's called the WHL, the Western Hockey League. And my teammates when I was 15, they were all getting drafted to that league. And I was like the worst player on that team. Basically, I weighed 220 pounds when I was like 14, 15.
Holy shit.
I was like a unit and not very mobile. But so at that age, they all got drafted. I didn't get drafted, but the same thing, like then a year later, a WHL team, Tri-City Americans, like they just noticed me and like they offered me a contract. So at 16, I signed that. So at 16 years old, I go to Tri-City in the WHL and then get cut. Like the last one, I was there for a few months, go home, play. Same thing. I go back the following year, get cut again, which is like not the most unnormal thing because that league is from 16 to 20. So like a pretty big spread. And a defenseman that's 16, 17, like there's not too many in the league because that's a very difficult thing. But then when I made the league at 18, then it was the same thing. I made it as like that bottom guy.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 20, I was like one of the best defensemen in the league.
Oh, no.
Best on my team for sure.
So this is obviously not like a club level. Is this at a professional level or like a semi-professional level at this point?
The WHL, I think, is like, I don't know if they call it semi-pro. It's like junior pro.
Okay.
So that's the best league in the world for players 16 to 20 years old. So everyone in the world is trying to get to that league. So it's a big deal. So there's like a lot of scouts at every game. And yeah, it's a really big deal to make that.
Because it sounds like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like university in the States, because a lot of professional recruiters recruit from universities. Is that kind of is that a good analogy?
Yeah, it's actually you have 2 paths. So when you turn 16, you usually have to decide, do I go to junior pro, which is like the CHL, where I went, or you can go to NCAA, to colleges in the US. And up until like a week ago, you couldn't do both. So that's really difficult for a 16-year-old
to make that decision.
It's like the CHL is like, I want to go pro as fast as possible. And in the CHL, you play 72 games. It's like super physical league. It's basically the NHL for younger players.
Yeah.
Or the college is like you usually go there at 18, 19, 20 is when you start. And then you have the however many years you're there for. So, and they only play about 2 games a week. So it's a lot different. But then it's like you get your education. So if hockey doesn't turn out, you have your education. Whereas over here, it's like you're kind of going all in.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a tough decision to make as a 16-year-old. And with my parents having no hockey background, no knowledge, they kind of just left it up to me, which was nice because I had a lot of friends with their parents like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And they didn't. And I kind of just did what all my friends did. Like all my friends that I'd been playing with, they all went the WHL route. And so that's kind of like what I naturally did. And I was like, do I really want to go to school?
Yeah.
Looking at it now, you hear about colleges and stuff, like when you get a bit older and like how it's like a lot of fun and stuff. But yeah.
So you wanted to be, I mean, you were all in on this and you wanted to go kind of the streamline route.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like also when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, you see the WHL because that's like, there's a local team there as well, the Vancouver Giants. And that's a big deal. Like it's like they would have like 8,000 people watching the games and stuff. And those guys are like, it's not the NHL, but it's almost there. Yeah. Right? Because those guys are like the direct feed into the NHL. So when you're growing up, you're seeing that that's your idols. That's who you're looking up to. So it's also for me, it's like that really impacted my decision. It'd be different if I was in a city that I wasn't so close to the WHL and that culture, then maybe I would have gone to college. But because you're like seeing that and then you all of a sudden get a contract offer, you're like, holy shit, like now I'm like.
Yeah, it seems like you were immersed in this like movement or this kind of like, you know, path in life. And then you were good and it just kind of like, so it wouldn't be unusual for like the folks in this league to be playing NHL in like a couple of years.
No. Yeah, that was like,
right.
I mean, NHL is a very hard league to make, but the CHL, the most players from the NHL come from the CHL. So because you have American players coming over there as well, right? So most like the top draft picks into the NHL are usually from the CHL.
Got it.
The top 5 are almost always majority from that league. You'll have a guy from college sometimes, but again, it's different because college is, you know, it's 18 to 24 years old. So an 18-year-old going to that league, it's like harder to dominate that league. Whereas if a 16-year-old goes to a 16 to 20, it's a little bit different. Right. But yeah, that's like a big conversation in North America with like the 2 routes. What's the better one to do for whoever? Yeah.
So you decided to go the streamline route. You played. How many years did you play there? And then what happened?
Yeah. So I played. So my first year as a 16-year-old, like I said, I got cut and I went back to Vancouver and played in like the local Vancouver league. And that was like pretty devastating to me because my friends had all made the WHL. So it really was like a setback. But again, it's like, I think I didn't purposely have this mindset, but it just kind of was there I didn't spend too long looking at what had happened. I still had like this end goal of like making the NHL. And it was like, okay, that happened, but now I'm here and I'm just doing this. I'm just working hard here. And like in that moment, in that experience, let's say. So then when the year was over, I had progressed and now like I was better off, you know, for the next year. So the next year I went back to Tri-City and that's a year I probably should have made the team, but they had a really good team. So if you're a young guy, they're like, well, we want to win. So it's not the easiest thing to develop this young defenseman. Yeah. I'm a big guy and they wanted me to be like this big, tough fighter guy. And at that age, it was a little bit like, that just wasn't where I was as a person. You know, like I'm a big guy and like I could play a little bit tough, but when you're 6'2", 6'3", and you're playing another team, that guy is like, I want to go fight that guy. Like big guys don't want to fight a smaller player. It's a lose-lose situation. It's like, oh, congrats, you beat up a smaller guy. So they always want to go after the bigger guy. So I felt like this kind of target on my head. Where like, if like at 17 years old, if your best player gets hit by like the 21-year-old like tough guy who's like huge,
you got to go and do it.
And I'm like, oh fuck, like not gonna go do this. And so at 17 I got cut, but then I went to I didn't go back home to the same league I was in before. I went to like a league that was just a bit lower in the BCHL, and they were also a good team, but like the level is just a little bit lower. So I was more able to be successful in that league. And my D partner was like this crazy 20-year-old guy who was like kind of a wild man on the ice, like fighting all the time and like just had so much fun fighting and like doing that stuff. So playing with him, I then was able to like immerse myself in this world of like just fighting all the time and like kind of being an idiot on the ice and like playing that role. So I played there, and then when I was 17, that's when there's the NHL draft. At 17, I had like scouts coming to see me and stuff. And I remember talking to scouts, and all of them were like, "Why did you get cut from the WHL?" Because usually they're going to go watch players in the WHL. And like, it's really weird that you had a player that's getting like noticed by NHL scouts that's been cut. Right? Because usually if you have a player that could get drafted, he's on that team. Like for sure on that team playing, they want him to get drafted. So a lot of the questions I had, like the first question I had from all these scouts were like, why did you get cut? So maybe they were thinking it was more of an attitude problem. And basically I told all of them, like, you can't ask me that. That's got to be like the coaches. They didn't think I'd play. And to their, like, looking back at it now too, like looking at the organization, the management, they have these players for 5 years. So you have them from 16 to 2021, right? So for them, they're like, this guy's got a lot of potential. So why are we going to have him here at 16, 17, sitting on the bench or sitting in the stands? So they were sending me down to like develop. Because
to come back when you're
back.
Right.
Because like I said, as a D man, there's not many D playing at 16 years old, right? Like they want them to go back to a different league to develop so that then they can have them at 18, 19, 20 and like dominate.
Yeah.
And now that I look back, that's what they were doing for sure. But as a 17-year-old, that's hard to see. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, I mean, it seems like a very mature thought process you had, this philosophy, because I remember being 16 playing football, you know, and if I didn't start that night or something like that, I'd just be fucking throwing my helmet, you know, that's just kind of how it was. So for you to see that and say, okay, like this is perhaps, I did get cut, but I'm going to go down kind of at a lower level and just dominate and kind of refine my skills and experience, and then I'll come back. I mean, is that something you kind of handle on your own, or did your parents or your brothers help kind of guide you in that direction?
No, there was zero emotional or mental support in that way, I would say. There was never that thought process. It was more of, I think I was just so used to it. Because I think at like 12 or 13, it was the first time I got cut from a team. And I still remember to this day, like there's like a line of players, right? And like after the last practice, the coaches have a coach's room and you're standing in a line and you go in there one at a time, they get cut or not. And you see all the kids walk out, they're happy or they're sad. And I'd always go last because I didn't want players to like see me after I got cut. And I would always get cut. I always like got cut at those younger ages, and I'd always cry. Like I'd go into my parents' car and I'd just be crying, and like I'd cry for a couple hours. And there was nothing that was like ever said by my parents that was like motivational. But I think it's just like, if I look back at it, I would just say like I just let myself have that time to be sad. Like I was sad and it sucked. But then it's like, oh, okay, well, now you have to go play on this team. And then it was kind of just like, then you shift, okay, I'm going to go play on this team. And that's that. And you like, I always had that goal of like where I wanted to go, right? Like maybe next year I'll make this team. And then over the year I get better and better. So then the next year, then I did make the team. And it's the same thing. When I'm on that team, then I was like, okay, now I want to make this team. Right. And then I get better and better. And then I barely make that team. Now I want to make that team. So I kind of just did that for a long time.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, at 12, I'm thinking like if an adult had to make that decision, I mean, that seems like such a mature like thought process. Because fuck, dude, at 12 years old, I didn't even know my ass from my mouth, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and so at 12, and so it kind of forced, I mean, am I making the right assumption by saying by playing hockey at this level at such a young age, or starting at such a young age, and then like getting really competitive from 12 on, did it force you to kind of grow up very quickly?
I think in that world, for sure. In that world, it did, because like I said, you always have that like next level in your mind, like that next thing that you want to make in your mind. So like that next team, right? So you're always had a goal. You always had something that you were like doing to get to, right? So I think that's like a healthy thing to have, is like you're always trying to achieve something. So you're always like driven to make that next team, and how nice is it going to feel to make that next team? And then you make it, and then you're like, oh, how's it going to feel to make that next team? And I think most hockey players have that mindset. I think if you talk to NHL players, it was always like that next team, next team, next team. And now that they make the NHL, how can I be the best player? How can I be better? How can I be better? And then you kind of need that. You can't be content with your own skills if you want to like climb a ladder of any business, I would say.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest kind of distinguishing characteristics of someone, especially in athletics, between someone who does okay and kind of drops off, and then someone who's very well. Because I played football, playing, in high school. I played basketball in college, snowboarded also, like at a competitive level. And the folks that you see that are really operating at a high level have that, it sounds very cliche, but have that kind of drive. And when you tell your story, I think because you had that fight and tenacity in you, I think it was actually good. And correct me if I'm wrong, that you were kind of at the top tier of that, because you're a small fish in a big pond, and you go into this league and you're perhaps at the bottom in terms of skills and everything, experience, but you're playing with guys that are fucking older and like much more experienced. So it's like, it kind of forces you to grow?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because if you were to compare yourself at 16 playing in that top league, I mean, you probably grew a lot faster than if you were the top dog at a lower league.
Right? Absolutely.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's how it was. And I remember when I was 16, like getting to the camp in the summer, because they have like a rookie camp. So it's like the young players. And then if you make it to the main camp, it's like with all the older guys. And I remember going to the rookie camp and being at like that level. And then they're like, yeah, well, we want you to stay for the main camp. And you go, and then all of a sudden these kids are like so much, they got beards and everything. And I remember like being really naive. I think when I was 14 years old, I went to the Calgary Hitmen camp, the same thing for the WHL. And I went to their rookie camp, and they asked me to go to the main camp and start in this game. And like there was like NHL draft picks and like just people that I knew of and that idolized. I'm now on the ice with them. So that was my first time that I was like, wow, I'm playing with these guys.
Is that
like,
surreal?
I'm kind of there. And they had me partnered with this kid named Keith Seabrook. And he is the younger brother of Brent Seabrook, who played in the NHL for a long time. And they're from the same town as me. And so like I knew Brent Seabrook growing up. Whenever people ask me like, who do you want to play like in the NHL? I was like, Brent Seabrook.
That was your idol.
Yeah. So this was like his younger brother by a couple years, who was also like an up and coming star.
Yeah.
So in this main camp, I get to the rink and like they have the lineup on a sheet, and I'm like playing with this guy. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I remember getting dressed and I'm like shaking in the room. I'm like so nervous. They're all warming up. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like, and I remember going on the ice and the puck dropped for like a game. The puck dropped and it went back into my corner. And I was like, I'm about to be murdered by someone, because the other team, like they're men, they're huge, and they look angry as hell. And I remember the puck went back in my corner. I just turned and skated as fast as I could to this puck. And I was just ready just to get it away from me. And I get to the puck and I turn, and there was a fight right off the draw with two of the 20-year-olds. And I was just like, holy shit, what's going on? Because that was like my first time witnessing a fight on the ice, like being on the ice. And like, I remember just laughing because I was so nervous about getting killed. And I like skated fucking 20 meters to the puck and like not even realize these two guys are just beating each other up and like off the draw. Yeah.
So you're playing, and then you're fucking you're nervous, and then you see this fight going on. I mean, dude, this seems like, dude, I have goosebumps just listening to you. But this is essentially like a dream come true for you.
Yeah.
And it must, you know, when they say like when you get into an accident, either things really go fast or like kind of slow down. Is that kind of what happened? Like, were you just kind of soaking it in?
It's a tough question. I think afterwards I was like quite proud of myself, I would say, because that camp that I went to in Calgary, that was before the draft, or it was right after the draft, sorry. So there was a lot of players that were on my team that were a lot better than me that didn't get drafted as well. And it's like, you can go to any camp you want to. So if you get invited to this camp or that camp, you can go. So and there's 4 players from my team that got invited to Calgary, and we're all like, oh, let's go. So we flew there with our parents. and we all went to the rookie camp. And I was the only one that had made it to the main camp, and I was the worst one out of all of them. And I was like, they were always the better kids on the team as well. And that's when I was like, holy shit. And they were all like super happy for me. They were my buddies. But I remember just like that being like, these guys just picked me over these guys that have always been better than me for like the last 5 years. And then going to that main camp, and like they all went home, and my dad like extended our flights to a couple of days later. But like, I think that was like the first time that I was like, oh, like I can be here. I can play in this league. Maybe like these guys that are better than me, I'm now kind of better than them.
Yeah. You felt like you had enough skills to warrant being there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah.
That's when that hit like I said, I'd always been here and looking at like that next step.
Yeah. Looking up.
Then I was like, okay, I could actually do that. Like, because when you're 12 years old, like the NHL for sure looks so far away, but the WHL also looked really far away. But like over time, because I wasn't like looking at this goal, I was just looking at that goal.
Right.
The next
step. Right.
Exactly.
But at this point, your next step was the ultimate kind of holy grail.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that must have been crazy to live your whole life as a hockey athlete or player. And again, just kind of take baby steps, incremental steps up that mountain. And then like finally, before you get like pre-summit, you can actually reach it, you know, and then you're like playing amongst folks that, you know, like you idolize. I mean, that must have been fucking crazy.
Yeah, it was really crazy. And I think one of the unique things was doing that camp, and I was in Calgary with those players, but then like I got home, and like 2 days later, that's when Tri-City, the other team, called me and like, we want to sign you. So I went to Tri-City and went to that whole thing. But then when I was 18, I was in like the middle of a blockbuster trade because my team in Tri-City was really, really good, and the Calgary Hitmen were really bad that year. And so Tri-City was like, we want to go all in to win it. So they traded me and another player that were both 18 that were good players to Calgary for like an older NHL player, basically. So we switched. So then I went to Calgary, and then we were on like the worst team in the league.
The best players on the worst team.
Yeah. But that was really awesome. Like that was a perfect thing for my career, because in Tri-City, they were like, I was like the 6th D-man, like this big guy that was kind of just like, they're wanting to just be big and tough and fight and like probably not have like too much potential in that league. And I went to Calgary, and like they sucked. So they were just like, hey, we're just developing players. No, like the coaches were really nice and like really like helpful with feedback and not like on you on every mistake. Because in Tri-City, they're trying to win every game. So if you made a mistake, like they're fucking on you. Like they're in your ear.
So that pressure was off of you.
Yeah, exactly. Then you go there and like
just have fun.
Yeah, exactly. And
learn.
When I got traded, it was back to Calgary. So that team that I'd gone to camp for 4 years before that. And they had said that they were going to sign me after that camp. And then they found out that Tri-City had signed me like basically the day of it that they were going to. So they had been like watching me all this time.
Wow.
So going there, like Calgary, major city in Canada, from Tri-City, like a huge difference just in the cities for like a 18-year-old kid. Like, going there now, you can also drink, because in the US it's 21, Calgary's 18. And like
it's a whole new world for you.
Oh yeah, you're playing in where the Calgary Flames, the NHL team, that's the same rink. So you share the rink. So you're like, also the dressing room is right beside each other. So when we'd walk in, we'd see the NHL guys there. So then again, it's like,
that's so insane.
You're right there again. So, and it kind of becomes, the surreal part is, then I was in the league at 18, and then at 19 and 20 doing really, really well. And then you kind of realize that you are that guy now. Because now when you have those main camps, there are 15-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids that are like coming up to you and being like, hey, like, you're my idol, like, you're awesome. Sick, I always watch you, and like this and that. You kind of like, without noticing it, you're like, oh, like, hey. And I think when I was 19 and 20, I kind of realized that, and I was just trying to be a little bit more friendly with like the younger players. Like when you had those main camps, the kids that like were young up and coming 15 and 16-year-olds, like just talking to them and like asking them how they're doing and stuff. And I just know when I was that age, that would have been
because you were in their position not too long ago.
Exactly.
So you knew how
like that.
You knew how nervous they were, you know how like, anxious they were and excited. So that's fantastic. I think that's a great part of being kind of mature and like offering that mentorship, because I think when people make it, they tend to forget about the folks, because again, I mean, you weren't there not too long ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's great that you were able to kind of offer up your hand and provide that kind of support. Because, dude, when you're that young, dude, that kind of stuff, like one conversation from your idol, like you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
It could just be a quick 2-liner or something, like, hey, get after it or whatever, and that means such a big difference.
Oh, I remember because in the summers we'd go home. So the team that I played with at 13, 14, like in my town called Tawasin, is a suburb of Vancouver. It's a small town. We had like 10 players go to the WHL, which is like absurd, really crazy. And then from there, I think 5 of us went to pro hockey, but every summer we'd come back to Tawasin and we'd train there together and in the summers. And we were from 14, we were like this group, but there was always a pro group. So we were like the junior pro, then there's a pro group above us and they were all NHL guys. And one of them I remember is like Milan Lucic. I don't know if you follow hockey at all. No. You know that name? Okay. No. So Milan Lucic was this player in Boston and he was probably the toughest guy in the NHL. And like he's 240, like just yoked. And like he was playing Vancouver Giants. So I'd watched him there when he was in the WHL and then he made the NHL and like right away made this huge name for himself because he just went and beat the wheels off of like the other toughest guy in the league. So he was coming back and training with us, right? Yeah. So as he made the NHL and I was on this kind of like progress up, we started training with those guys because we were becoming pros. Yeah. And I remember the one time he talked to me, he just asked if he could like have a drink of my like drink of my water. And I was like, yeah, sure, man. I remember like being like, wow. Holy shit. Because like even though we were training together in the same gym, like they were like, they'd always have a partner that's another pro guy, and like the junior guys would kind of stick to each other, and they were friendly guys, but like the first time he came up to me, he was like, hey, can I have some of your water? And I was just like, sure, man. Like, go ahead.
Because you feel like those guys are kind of untouchable. Yeah. And now you're like, you're playing, you're practicing with him. Yeah. Fuck, that must have been so crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy to be like, wow, these guys are so much better than me. And then just over time being like, oh, okay, now they're not. Now we are comparable. And I never made the NHL for multiple reasons of it being like fucking super hard to make and super crazy. Some of the guys I did train with did make it, but you still get to a point where it's like there's not that big of a difference. So you don't have that big of a difference of a player like me and then a guy that does make the NHL. And I ended up going my first year pro over to the KHL, so in Russia. And that's the second best league in the world, so like right under the NHL. And I went there from Calgary, and that's a huge jump. That's like, no one does that from the WHL to the KHL. It's like really, really, I think maybe one of the only players to ever do that.
Really, wow. It's such a high step up.
Yeah, it's a high step up. It's like there's players that go to the NHL, but no one's going to the KHL. You know what I mean? Like, because the best players, if you make the NHL, like you're the best. So it's like, to make the KHL is just kind of a really weird jump. You usually wouldn't go like Europe if you're that good. You just go to the NHL. Right. But I didn't make the NHL, but then I went to the KHL. A team in Prague, which was obviously a pretty interesting city, but going there, my agent also was like kind of shocked that they like had offered me a contract because it's such a weird leap. And I remember I got there in the first ice session, like these guys are all like have played in the NHL, like all of them. Every North American player on my team had played 5-8 years in the NHL. Oh, wow. So going there, like getting dressed with them, I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like I watched this guy in the NHL. Not like trained with him or grown up with him, but like seen him strictly on the TV. And now I'm like sitting beside him in a dressing room. And all these guys, they were like superstars in Sweden and Czech Republic, Russia. I remember the first practice that I went out there, I was like, these guys are so much better than me. The level was like absurd.
Right. And there's a big gap there.
Big gap. Yeah, really big gap. Same as when I joined the WHL when I was like 15, 16, that gap.
So you felt you had that feeling all over again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, again, like over my whole career, it was just like always like that thing where you like make that next level barely and you're just like, holy shit. And then I remember after like 2 months, then I was there. And then I was like,
just in 2 months
players. Yeah. And that's all it takes really, because it's like you're adjusting to that level, to that speed. And in hockey, it's mainly the speed of like going from one of the better players in the WHL, and then you go to the KHL, it's like those guys do everything faster and they do everything at top speed. So when you're passing or shooting or whatever, it's like you're doing it maximum speed all the time. And they're just obviously like really good.
So they're not throttling down at any point, though.
No. And it's like when you hit pro hockey too, it's a big change because in the WHL, it's like that group of players is usually there for 5 years. So you have the same guys. It's like these relationships, and like the organization too is like they want to develop you. So they're like pretty friendly with you and pretty nice. When you go to pro hockey, it's like you could cut instantly. If they don't like you, you're out of there. And we had guys like that get got fired like really quickly too.
So if a lot of those players formerly played in the NHL and now they're playing in Europe, is that, I mean, why wouldn't they just stay in the NHL and retire there? Why do so many guys then transfer to like a European league?
Yeah, so usually in the NHL, I would say career, if you're able to get 6 years in the NHL, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Because there's always new players coming in, right? So if you join the NHL at 19, 20 years old, like every year there's on your team alone, if you're a D-man, every year there's a new D-man coming up because there's a younger guy coming up, right? So every year you have one, and then the next year two, and then so after 6 years, now you've like completely rotated your roster. So I'd say most players only can play 5 years.
Wow.
NHL 6 years. Because
So your
players coming up.
So your shelf life in and playing professional hockey at the NHL is only about 5 years.
Yes, not for the best players. For the best players, then it's more like 10, 14 if they're lucky.
But on average.
Yeah. Those are just like maybe one or two per team. There's a guy that's like been there from 20 to 30. Very rare. Most players, it's like 5, 6 years. Maybe they go to a different team for 1 or 2. And then they know it's like, I'm kind of out of the top 7 for the D. And instead of going to play in the lower league, which is the American Hockey League, the AHL, it's like, let's go to Europe.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the KHL, you can still make a couple $1 million a year. And then it's like, you're in Europe. So you're traveling around and it's a little bit nicer lifestyle.
So that's very appealing to a lot of folks that are kind of at the tail end of their NHL career. It seems like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's not just NHL, it's just pro hockey.
Yeah, pro.
Because when you're in North America, you're trying to make the NHL. So whether you are in the ECHL or AHL and you like kind of hit it and you kind of realize I'm not going more than here, maybe a couple of years it takes you, then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go to Europe. Because in North America, it's like so much fighting. You play so many games, like so much traveling. It's a huge grind. Whereas Europe, it's like you don't play 2 games in 2 days, and it's like very little travel, and like you have breaks and stuff. So it's like very appealing for players to like come to Europe when they're done in North America.
Yeah.
And some guys come for 1 year, some guys come for 10 years. You can play longer over here because there's not so much fighting and so much like roughness in the game, less injuries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because those are the things that you have to think about. I mean, when you're 14, 16, it's kind of like, I'll do fucking anything. But when you start hitting your 20s and, you're not tail end of your career, but maybe like, you're still looking around, maybe around the corner, because again, professional athletes, I mean, nowadays in like basketball, for example, like LeBron James is over 40, still playing at a high level. But what is the, like, at what age in hockey professionally are you kind of like the old dog? And when people are like, all right, maybe you should hang up your cleats, now.
It depends on what league you're playing in for sure. But I would say anytime, I mean, in Europe, in North America, after 32, that's like pretty good if you're still playing in the NHL. There's not too many players like over 32, just because like younger guys are coming in, they're faster and everything. And
just bringing it.
Yeah. But if you look in like Norway, a Norwegian player could play till 40 quite easily. And because there's not like that many players coming up, and it's like an easier league. It's like, it's not, like I said, not so much travel, not so rough, but it depends on the player. I think after 35 is like when you start having guys retire.
Do you like because I know now we're kind of transitioning. At what point did you say, like I've had a great career. I've had a lot of good experiences. At what point did you say, okay, I'm going to, because you're coaching now at what point, where was that shifting point where you said, okay, like I'm going to perhaps slow down a little bit of my professional hockey, career and focus on maybe some other things or maybe into coaching? What kind of, at what point did you make that shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a player, every player, when they're a teenager, they want to make the NHL. And a lot of them are like, I will do anything to make the NHL.
Yeah.
That's my main goal. And you get really caught up in that goal because people will say, well, what if you don't make it?
Right.
And you're like, I didn't think about that. I'm just like, you're like, I don't know. I'll figure it out as it comes.
Yeah.
So when I didn't make the NHL and I came to Europe when I was 25, then it starts kind of creeping in your head like, okay, what am I going to do after this? Like I can keep playing for some time, but what am I going to do after? And I think a lot of guys don't retire because of they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do after. And I was like that. Like because I didn't go to college, so I didn't have like a degree or anything. So I met my partner here in Stavanger, and we were playing here, and the same thing. It's like, oh, what am I going to do after? And it's like, well, I can still keep playing because I'm still very good with a younger player somewhat. But I think after you have kids, the European life becomes more difficult because you're going from country to country and you don't know where you're going to be. Right. Because the season ends in April and the season then starts in August. So you have that time of like, you're only on 1-year contracts, maybe 2 if you're lucky. So from May to June, I got my partner asking me like, what's going on? Like, where are we going? And you kind of, maybe you get some offers that are good, some that are bad. Do we wait? Do we like this spot? And like talking to her, like, oh, there's offers from this city for this much money, which is a fun thing. But once you have kids, it's more stressful because you got to worry about like Barnahagas and kindergartens and schools and this and that. So we were in Denmark when my son was 3 months old, my first son. And that was okay because he wasn't in a kindergarten or anything. So that was interesting. But then when we went to Germany, then it was like, okay, well, we need a kindergarten because now he's 1.5 years old. So we set him up into a kindergarten there. And that was okay. But then at the end of the season, my partner wanted to go back to Norway. So then I was like, okay, now we got to find a new contract in Norway. So it is very stressful once you have kids or a partner. Yeah. Because when you're by yourself, it's easy. It's like you get the contract, you like type in on the city name on Google. You're like, ah, sure.
Why not?
Good. Like, let's go. But now you have another person and like they have things that they also want and don't want. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. And then when you have kids, even more difficult. And you also, in my last year when I played in Lillehammer, it was like 2 boys at home that were like 1 and 3 years old. And it was like every weekend, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going now. I have to go on the bus. And you like say goodbye to them and you're sitting on the bus and like they're waving. Tough. And sometimes they're like really sad if you're leaving and your partner's sad because now she's got to be home alone with the kids like all day or a whole weekend or whatever it is. And you'd like go and play this game and maybe you'd lose like 5-0 and you'd bus back like 6 hours and you're just like, what am I doing with my life? Like I just missed like this time with my kids to like for no reason. Right. And so then that's when I was like, this is not really great for anyone. I like my last season playing was actually my best season.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was when I started to like also understand more about my own game and finding consistency and production and did really well. But at the same time, the family side of it was like getting worse because the kids were getting older. Yeah. And that's when my friend, an old teammate from here in Stavanger, Mark Van Gilder, he reached out to me and he was like, hey, do you want this coaching job that I'm doing with this company in the US? So then I talked to him about that and it sounded awesome because him and I had talked about coaching together. But basically, it's like if you coach, it's the same schedule. You're still on the bus. You're still doing all this stuff. Right. But this was like online. So this was like from home. Players would hire us. We'd watch their games, give them feedback on what happens to adjust. And it's like, yeah, now I'm working from home. So it's a lot easier. But I would say like that last year with my kids being 1 and 3, it's like you had the family side of it getting harder and my relationship with my partner putting like more attention on that. And then also, then I got that job offer. Yeah. So before the job offer, I was like, well, what am I going to do? Because as like the man, I'm also like, I can't just go into unemployment or I can't just like do nothing. You know, I had to like support them and have, there was also like, I just wouldn't even know what to do. I had to have no ability to do anything. It wouldn't just be like, oh, I'll just go into unemployment until I find something that I want to do. It's like, I would have no idea. Like I'd have zero clue what to do. So that's a scary thing because I'd always been into hockey. I'd never worked another job. So it was such a, almost like the abyss. It was like deep space to me. So then when I got that job offer, I was like, well, that's kind of perfect. Yeah, perfect timing with both of it. And then we can move back to Stavanger because she's from here.
Yeah, I mean, because you're 32, I'm 40, a little bit older, but we're kind of in the same generation. And, you know, you hear a lot, you know, you hear obviously like in professional sports, boxing, especially because it's such a physical sport, but you hear that a lot, you know, like they have a very, very illustrious career. You know, they do very well. They become world champs. They play at a professional level. And then that time kind of comes to an end, right? That chapter comes to an end. And a lot of these folks, like you said, they don't have a fallback. They don't have like a degree or you know, work experience. So then like that transition becomes really, really difficult, you know, at times, because your whole life, since you were literally since 4 years old, 12 years old, 16, that's all you've known, you know? And so it's that transition. I mean, I know a couple of professional athlete friends that, again, have been in that boat, and it's really tough, you know, because it's like, if that's all you know, and that's all you've done since you were 14 years old, like how and what do you do next, you know? And I think it's a great opportunity if you're kind of looking at the glass half full to say, okay, like now I can try something new. Perhaps it's a passion project or something, but it is a daunting thing. I mean, did you kind of go through, I mean, you found your niche in teaching now. Are you getting that same kind of fulfillment that you had on the ice in teaching, or how was that kind of transition for you?
I would say it's a completely different fulfillment because now I'm helping other kids kind of achieve their goals in hockey. And that's very nice because the relationships you create with these players, you see the same things in them that like I had, right? So you talk to an 18-year-old, they want to play in the NHL, they want to play wherever. And I'm there to like help them through it. And I can tell them my experiences and whatever to help them. And kind of when they like do have success, then it also feels nice because you like help them with that. And especially if they're like really happy with like what I teach them and what I show them, that's obviously nicer, but I'd say it's completely different. And I would say that there is still a huge hole in my like life and in my like personality that is missing from like that hockey and like that competitiveness. And that, I would just say like the compete of hockey is something that you miss for sure. And like, and it's silly to say, but like even in North America, going out with like your team and like just playing and like getting in fights and like just trying to achieve this goal, no matter how you got there, achieving this goal together, like that's something I miss for sure.
Yeah, I think if we have any listeners that are younger, perhaps teenagers in their 20s, you know, I hate to be the old guy giving advice, you know, but I think perhaps you could second what I'm saying here, but really, really, really take full advantage of where you are in life, you know, because again, we're not like entirely old. We still have a long life ahead of us. But if I look back in my teens and my 20s, you know, you kind of take it for granted, you know, but when we reflect back, you know, in your professional hockey career, playing with the team, like traveling, that stuff is hard, but it's so fucking fun. You know, like I look back, you know, when we used to play football and getting on the bus, whether we win or lose, you know, just like having that camaraderie, you know, it's an amazing thing, you know, that feeling you get, that nervousness you feel right before a game, you know, like warming up. Like I get chills just thinking about it, you know, and obviously playing at a professional level, that must have been, you know, a 10x that, you know. So I would honestly say, like if you're that young and you're into something such as hockey or sports, you know, or music or whatever it is, I mean, it doesn't have to be sports, whatever that is. I feel like it's so important just like to own it. And it sounds cliche, but to be present and really take full advantage of it. Because again, when that career ends, which it will, no matter what you do, you're going to look back and those memories are going to be so fond, you know? And I think a lot of people tend to always be, and it is great to be kind of striving for that next thing, you know, but I've learned personally that, you know, in looking back, I should have really enjoyed what I was doing, you know, at that time. And I think that could be said about now, you know, I have two kids and you have two kids, and it's tough, like you're sharing with me, the lack of sleep and everything. I mean, sleep is obviously something that I totally underestimated, before having kids. And but conversations like this between you and I, where we're kind of in similar points in our lives with two kids and a family and everything, it's easy to allow the challenging things in our lives right now kind of take over and kind of really push me down. But it takes a conversation like this to stimulate the fact that I have two beautiful kids. They're healthy. I have a beautiful wife. We're good financially. So to look at that and really embrace that as well, because again, 20 years from now, I look back on today and say, did I do that? I don't want to have that regret.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I honestly think I will have the regret no matter what of like not spending enough time with my kids. I think I've learned now, like you can for sure not spend enough time with your kids. But I think you'll always be like, I didn't spend enough time with my kids. I wish I spent more, because when I see a photo of my older son who's 6 turning 7, like when I see a photo of him when he was like 1 or 2 or 3, I'm like, I wish I was there more. And even like now, it's like, I wish I was more with them a month ago, kind of thing. And I think that's a good process to have as a parent, because you should obviously want to spend time with them, but you should also realize it's not going to be like this forever, right? Like it is, like they are going to hit a stage where they stop wanting you to hold them. And now they're off playing with friends. My older son's turning 7. Like we're hitting that now where he wants to just go off and play with friends. And he kind of like talks back to us a little bit now as well. And like, he's becoming his own person. And the more independent he gets, the less dependent he is of us, right? And you lose that like cuddling and holding his hand and stuff. And it's like really sad to think about, but it's obviously going to happen no matter what. But I think the more that you can like cherish those moments, I think that's like, for me, if I were to be dead tomorrow, I would be like, that's what I would be most grateful for. Like those moments with my kids, of like being at their hockey, watching them achieve something, or like holding their hand. Like my younger son, Lucas, sleeps with me every night, like, and he's 4. And I've slept with him since he was like 1.5. And every night he'll like get out of bed, walk over to our room and like sleep with me. And like, he like has to sleep on my arm. He like puts my arm down. He like uses my arm as a pillow, and it's, you lose some sleep for sure. But I just know that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll look back at that and be like, that was really nice.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the whole thing, that parent-child dynamic. They, I forgot what study, it perhaps was like a Stanford study where they interviewed like, I think 10,000 people on basically their deathbed. And the two common things that came out, overwhelmingly more common than anything else, was travel, or the lack of travel. They wish they would have traveled more in their life, and time with family. So I think that kind of is a testament to kind of what you're going through, what I'm going through. As dudes, it's uncomfortable to admit, but fucking dude, cuddling with our kids is like, it's so amazing. And my youngest is only 1.5, but our oldest is 3, and he's starting to communicate, and he's starting to say jokes and create his own personality, just like your kids. And it's becoming like more and more fun. It's like you almost have like this little dude that lives in your house that's like funny. I mean, he'll do stupid things. He'll drop milk on the floor, but it's like it's charming. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things that kind of just happen. No one gives you a book on how to do it, but you kind of learn things as you go. And for me, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been the most incredible thing. And it sounds so stupid because everyone says it. They're like, oh, your kids are. And for those folks that don't have kids, I mean, we're kind of letting you know what you're missing out on. But I never, I had my first child when I was 37. So I wasn't that young, and it took me that long to have kids because I was waiting for the right partner, obviously, and to be in the right headspace financially and everything else. But now that I do have kids, I mean, it's really one of those things that like you can't describe into words the first of all the love you have for them, but the excitement you have. Again, like for me, I'm excited to see them become 15, 16 and, start a career in sports or, academics or whatever it is. And to like have that friend essentially for the rest of your life until our passing, So, I think that's something special that I never not having kids prior, like that's something that I could never have expected. Has that been some similar experience for you as far as, being a father and fatherhood?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think I've read books before being a father, but they kind of all were like, "Oh, you'll figure it out as you go." Like they all were
Yeah.
like, "You can be as prepared as you want, but you
Yeah.
won't be prepared."
Yeah.
And that's why I tell friends or anyone that's having kids, it's like you can prepare, and it's
Mm,
good to be prepared, but
yeah.
you also need to be prepared that you will not be prepared.
Yeah.
Like there will be times that you're like, "Holy shit! Like
Mm,
what is going on?"
yeah.
But I think for me, I've always been a person that was like, I was always looking forward to having kids.
Mm,
Um, and for me, it was just finding the right partner.
yeah.
And
Mm,
so I always wanted the kids. I always wanted kids, but I always had a hard time being like finding a partner that I wanted to have
yeah.
kids with, and I saw a long-term
Mm,
relationship with. So then when I met my partner, we had kids quite fast because we were both wanting that and like waiting for the right person.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say like always wanted kids for sure. And now that I have them, it's like you said, like I'm looking forward to when they get older
Mm,
and you can like do more stuff kind of like as men
yeah.
together or
Yeah.
as like adults, let's say. But I also like I'm fearing that I know that when they do get older, I'm gonna be like, oh, I miss
Yeah.
so much when they were like learning to walk
Yeah.
or when you like would give them piggyback rides or
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple of friends who had kids quite young. I have a friend my age who has a 20-year-old and then a 16-year-old and then a 7-year-old, I think. So I kind of defer to him because he's kind of like, he's kind of paving the way for me. So I always ask him questions like, hey, did you go through this? And he's like, oh yeah, but yeah, that's one of the things he said he misses the most, just like, when they stop cuddling, and stuff like that and start playing with friends. I think that's kind of where you're going through it, like your 7-year-old, he's becoming a little bit more independent and stuff like that. So, um, he said, yeah, just be aware. And he said it goes by in a flash,
Yeah.
and it seems like for us the days are long, but I guess the years go fast, because again, to think that my kid's already 3 and your kid's, 7 and 4. Like I don't know, has time been going fast for you, or does it seem like it's
Yeah. I think it like that's a tough one because it's both. Like there's times that you're like, holy, I just need them to get older so we can sleep. Like I had said to you that both our kids struggled with sleeping in the first year. So that time I'm like, one, you're just a zombie because you're not sleeping well and like everything is just like a blur. I look back at that time and I'm almost like, how was I even remembering to breathe? Because it's like so tired.
yeah.
So much screaming from the kids and stuff. And it's like that time I remember it going so slow and wanting it to go
Be over,
faster.
yeah.
Yeah. And like get to that next stage.
Yeah.
And now that I'm at those next stages, I'm like, I want it to slow down.
Yeah.
And also probably because I'm at the end of like this stage with my kids, I'm nearing the end of it. So I'm like wanting to hold on to it for as long as possible.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, when you're losing sleep and you're getting up 3 times a night, you're like, oh, I just want this to be over.
Yeah.
I just want this phase to be over.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, you're right. You want it to slow down because that next chapter is like right around the corner as well, and time is obviously something we can't control or stop.
No.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My wife and I, or when we were dating, we never argued. And that was kind of like, we were kind of proud of that. But when we had kids and we were losing sleep, dude, we fought like not often, but we did fight.
Yeah.
It was very unusual, and it was very uncomfortable because it's not something we were used to. But now that the kids are sleeping a little bit and we're getting our sleep back, that's gone away. Again, I'm not saying that arguing or having disagreements is a bad thing. I mean, you should be able to communicate and work those things out. But it was just unusual for us because, we weren't, we got along and everything we kind of agreed on. I mean, we had our differences in opinion, but we never argued until we had kids, So yeah, this is kind of a loaded question, or a heavy question, I would say. But if you could fast forward and like record like a secret thing, I mean, maybe they'll listen to this, maybe they won't. But if you could deliver one kind of principle or message to your kids as a father, based on your experience and kind of where you are now, what would that be?
That's a tough one. That would probably take me hours and hours to think of right
Yeah.
down, but I would just say
Yeah.
just to love themselves. To basically, I think that's like a fear that I have, is that they won't be like happy with themselves. And I think it's obviously natural when you're like a kid and a teenager to like see other people and like wish that you had what they have, their body or money or family or whatever it is. But I think if they can find like happiness just with themselves, I think that that's going to be like a broad thing that will help them in life. And yeah, so I think if they can like find inner happiness, I think that's the one thing I would strive for them to have. Hope that they have.
And I think that's a lot of things that even as adults we could try to adopt into our lives, because in the whole advent of social media and stuff like that, I think it's quite easy to fall into that trap as well, to see and say, oh, that person's got more money, that person's got a fancier house, they're living a better lifestyle. Oh, they're in another country again, I think it's easy to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think having kids, for me at least, has definitely changed my perspective. I'm not throwing my dad under a bus. Him and I have our ups and downs, and stuff like that. But I just wish, kind of answering my question, if I had to deliver a message to my kids, would be definitely to be happy in their own skin. But aside from that, the thing that I kind of struggle with now is I've always done what's like right in my life, because coming from an immigrant family, my parents and my family relied on me a lot to do kind of the necessities. Like I was picking up phone calls from collection agencies at 7 years old. I mean, I literally got to the U.S. when I was 4. So 3 years in a new country at 7 years old, picking up the phone. I mean, my mom literally just handed me the phone, like, and said, "Hey, what are they saying?" And I'm like, I don't fucking know, But I've been doing that since I was 7. So it forced me to grow up very quickly, and I didn't. So I had this kind of like this thing where I felt like I had no room for error, So I didn't really explore things that I liked doing. I just did the things that I knew I had to do. And up until I was, I had a good job out of college. I went to college, and that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to college. You're supposed to get a good job, buy a house, get married, have kids, and then, die. And I thought that was my path. And I didn't realize till later on in life, like I was working for the FBI in Hawaii. And at around year 6 or 7, I realized, okay, this isn't my path in life. And I really wanted to travel, So I always tell everyone it was like the hardest but best decision I ever made in my life. I quit the FBI. And, I stayed with the FBI 2 years too long, because I wanted to quit 2 years before. But I stayed because, again, that sentiment that I had with regards to my parents of having to do what's right for them and make them proud kept me there, and very unhappy. So I definitely, I quit my job. I ended up traveling for a year, the best year of my life, one of the best years of my life, arguably. So I would tell them to like follow what really excites you in life, Yeah, sure, there are things that you have to do as a kind of transition into adulthood, but I think the advice that I would give was like, just do what you're fucking passionate about, whether it's playing hockey or doing carpentry. It doesn't matter what it is. And I feel like that's a big hole in my life now, where, I do a lot of things well, but I don't do one thing excellent, and that kind of bothers me. And so if I had any kind of advice that I would give to my kids is find that one thing that you really enjoy, because if you really enjoy it, the odds are you're going to be really good at it. Like for you, watching your brothers play hockey and, bringing your equipment with you, whether you played it or not, because you loved it. No one forced you to do it, and then because you loved it so much, you're very good at it. So I think that would be a piece of advice that I would give my kids, but yeah, for you, like, you're coaching now and you're here. What's next for Spencer? I know having family and having kids and a wife, throws new elements into what you do. So what's kind of what's in your not next chapter, but like what's in the future for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've kind of like adopted the Norwegian culture of like I'm not like putting too much pressure on myself of like achieving a work life or something in my work life. I am more focused on what can I achieve at home, like with my family and stuff, and what can we do to help our kids have like a nice childhood and set them up for like success, their adulthood, and not so they have to go to therapy every week and stuff like that. But so I would say I am more like this job that I'm doing, that I do have a passion for and helping people, and it is enjoyable. And there is like, obviously there is still growth in it, and I can still like go up a ladder, let's say, and do better and make more. But I would say I'm more like focused on the family aspect of things.
Yeah.
But in the job that I'm doing, I would just say like just my one goal now is just like getting to more kids, like getting to more players, and like yeah, helping more players with this and making it more like common to do. I would say, because when I was playing, like the really unfortunate part was that I didn't know about this stuff until my friend had called me and asked like about the job offer.
Oh, right.
Right. So then I retired, and then I learned all this stuff with hockey and how to read the game and how to see certain situations to be more successful on the ice. So I retired and then learned all this stuff that would have helped me so much during playing, to a point where I'm like, should I just go back and start playing? And I still have that feeling now. I'm like, should I go back and start playing again? Because I know all this stuff now. So that part, as frustrating as that is, I'm also like, I really want to get this information to other players, because I know that it would have helped me tenfold.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, hoping just to continue to grow what I'm doing and getting it to as many players as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that you learned that after you retired, you know, and I understand why you want to get back, because you have this knowledge now. But I think it's very commendable and admirable that you, now having this knowledge, looking back, like want to share that, because again, something like that, you can only learn from experience. You don't read in a book, you know. I mean, if a coach doesn't teach you, or someone like yourself who has kind of, you know, gone through that experience doesn't teach you, how would these kids know? You know, and I think that's so important, because it could change the trajectory of their game, or their you know, whether they play at a very high level or not. So
for sure. I mean, we work with like about 100 players in North America from all levels, and we have guys that we've had from like college, and now they're in the NHL, right? Or they've been at 2 levels lower, and they've kind of climbed up, and now they're in the NHL. They've reached their goals, and I wouldn't say like, oh, that's just because of us, because obviously they've put in a lot of years of work. But I would say like the knowledge that we can help these players with makes such a big deal. It makes it so much easier to see the game and like be able to read the game and read all these certain situations. And it's like in a hockey game, what I didn't realize that it's the same situations over and over and over. They're slightly adjusted, but it's the same situations from the start to the end. So if you know the situations that are going to come, the problems, and you know the answer, it just makes it so much easier. And it's really just up to the player on how well they can absorb that information and like use it in a game.
Yeah. So they might have the physical capabilities, but that that knowledge of how the game operates from beginning to end. Because like you said, I mean, I think in all sports, I mean, there's only so many variations to it, you know? So like if you learn the fundamentals and it becomes, you drill at it and you drill at it and it becomes ingrained, it becomes kind of like second nature. I would imagine that's tremendous amount of help on the ice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the only way that it doesn't work is just, I think, if the player is not very brave. And we use that word a lot, is like being brave, because a lot of them, like if I just use in Norway as an example, as defensemen, there's like in hockey, there's like a blue line, right? And you're in the offensive zone. So usually in the offensive zone, a defenseman is not very like brave. Usually they're playing it quite safe because they're like the last line of defense, let's say. But like now in hockey, in the NHL and everything, it's like that's changing. And so now the defensemen are very offensive. They do hold the puck. They try to beat a guy, even though they're that last line of defense. And here in Norway, like they've been taught from 6 years old, just throw the puck down, like just shoot it, just throw the puck down. So none of them have developed the skills to like create offense in the offensive zone, if that makes sense. So they're all like very passive. They're all just like, give the puck to someone else, give it to someone else, give it to the forwards, let them try to create a goal. So for us, it's like showing them, hey, this is like what you're doing here is not helping your team. It's actually making it worse. And you're heightening the odds of like turning over the puck to the other team anyways. So you might as well try to beat someone And like from there, then we can work on like how to beat them. But the main thing is just trying. And that first step is probably the most common hurdle that we have with defensemen, especially, is just trying. Yeah. And a lot of them I've worked with for years, and they still, I talk to them every couple of weeks. It's like, hey, you know, how'd it go? Oh, you know, I saw it, but I couldn't do it. Like I didn't have like that braveness.
They literally couldn't take the shot. I mean, they could have, but
it's like, it's hard to explain in a way, but it's like, if you imagine a football player trying to beat someone one-on-one, that's all it is in that specific area of the ice. Like how to beat someone one-on-one, because you need to advance the play. In hockey, you need to beat someone for there to be a breakdown. Otherwise, it's just on the perimeter.
Right.
So teaching them that, and it's like, I show them guys that we work with that do it, or NHL players. We show them the clips and the examples so they can see it and they can visualize it themselves. But that is the biggest hurdle, is just trying and not worrying about making a mistake, because that's what they've been raised to do in all places in the world for hockey. But like here especially, it's like, don't make a mistake. How dare you make a mistake?
Yeah. Are they fearing that if they do charge and try to, you know, they do take that risk, that they're going to turn the puck over?
Yeah, I think that they will worry that they will turn the puck over, and I think it's a natural thing for humans, but they see like the worst case scenario, right? There's something that's scary, something that makes them nervous, that's different. They see that and they see, what's the worst case scenario here? And it's like, I've turned over the puck, the guy gets it on a breakaway and scores. I come back to the bench, the coach yells at me, all the fans throw tomatoes at me and banana peels. I go home, my wife leaves me. So I think like you picture the worst extreme, and your mind almost is preparing you for that, because it's preparing you so like it's not like surprised when that does happen. So it's a trick that we have to like kind of get into our players' heads. Like that's not necessarily going to happen. That's like 0.01% chance of actually happening. And there's a pretty good chance that it just works. And if it doesn't work, it's going to be okay. Like if you look at the best players in the NHL, that's what they're doing. And they have to do that. That's why they're the best. And they didn't just make the NHL and then all of a sudden say, I'm going to start doing this thing now. It's like it took them years and years to do it and perfect it and get better at it. And then now they're obviously the best. So it's the same with these guys at whatever league they're in. It's like, you need to work on this. It might not work every single time at the start, but the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it.
Of course.
Like anything in life.
Yeah, like anything. Yeah. You know, they say that saying, you know, you don't make any shots you don't take.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the path of least resistance, again, just as human beings, is the route of fear. It's like, if I fuck this up, which is going to be in my head, like more likely than me succeeding, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. My wife's going to leave me, and I'm going to lose the game. So I think that's a natural thing. I have a friend based out of LA, but he plays professional golf in Australia, and he plays at a PGA level in the States, you know, depending on the tournament. But he was telling me how, because he knows physically and as far as his technique, he can play with anybody in the world. I mean, the Tiger Woods of the world. But he said the thing that's holding him back is his mental game. Because, I mean, as you can imagine, like golf is so mental. You know, if you get that kind of block or fear, or if you doubt yourself, I mean, your shot's way off, you know, and there's nothing like physically wrong with him, but he was talking about the importance of mental. Is mental like as big of a factor in hockey as it is in, let's say, in golf or something?
I would say golf is probably the most important to be mentally strong. I think if you are mentally weak in golf, there's just zero chance you make it, because if you miss one shot, now you're in your own head for 18 holes. So I would say golf is uniquely, you need to be very strong mentally, but I think any sport now, like they're putting more precedence on being mentally strong and like how to work on your mental game to help you in the game. So I think it was when I was a kid too. When I was a teenager, I remember there was mental coaches, but it wasn't such a big thing. Whereas now in the NHL, if you look at, I'm sure most of those guys have a mental coach that they talk to however long or however many times a month. But it's such an important thing with like finding consistency, finding your own potential, and like not dwelling on like the mistakes that you make. Because if you are only thinking about the mistakes you make, there's a pretty high chance you're just going to make them again.
Yeah.
Right. Because your mind is just seeing you make that mistake over and over and over. So that's kind of like what we talk about with our players is before games, we say to them, like, take 5 minutes at the rink and visualize yourself doing whatever it is, whatever scenario, doing it right.
Yeah.
And you just visualize that over and over and over. And then when you go into a game, when you hit that scenario, your brain's going to know what to do. It's already seen itself. Yeah, exactly. And we use it in an analogy of like basketball players. That's what they do, right? So they go to the arena and they shoot balls in the morning. And then at the hotel or when they go back to the arena, like they'll often close their eyes and like see themselves shooting from different areas of the arena, maybe the areas they shoot the most balls from. Yeah. And they'll visualize themselves from feet, shoulders, hands, the ball, holding the ball, the feeling of the ball. And your brain doesn't know the difference. Doesn't know the difference of visualizing that thing versus actually doing it. So that's the same thing that we preach in hockey is like, visualize yourself being successful in this situation over and over and like how that feels to see yourself confident, like see yourself confident and like trust yourself and have that kind of swagger. And then when you're in a game, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about what do I do here? What do I do there? It's like you've already done it in your brain. Like let your brain just take over.
Yeah. Yeah. I always remember playing like high school sports and in college. The guys who were the best always had the most swagger. They were the cockiest on the field. And the guys who had that kind of edge, but were able to like control it with discipline, were fucking unstoppable. But of course, on the other end, like if you're just an asshole and you play well, I mean, that could, kind of go the other way as well. But again, the guys who had the most swagger, had that confidence, because they're willing to take that risk. If you look at, for example, like the basketball analogy, I think I saw something. I mean, Steph Curry, obviously, arguably one of the best 3-point shooters in the world. But if you look at how many shots he misses, or takes compared to the average, NBA player, it's extraordinary, because he takes more shots and that's why he makes more, So I think that's an important part of sports that if you instill early on to say, yeah, I mean, take risks, calculated risks, that's what we kind of drill for, get mentally prepared. I think the performance on the ice or, whatever it is will be dramatically improved. I think sports psychology is something that, oftentimes in high school, like that wasn't even a thing. It's like, just go out there and fucking do what you practiced, don't fuck up. But as you start getting higher and higher in like levels, as far as like, professional sports, I think the sports psychology portion of it is becoming even more and more, important, So, yeah, it's interesting. I never played professional sports. That's why I was so interested in getting to know you and to talk to you about your experience. But yeah, but hey, I really appreciate you being here. We met again not too long ago, and I hope we get a chance to hang out even more. We have 2 kids that are relatively the same age, so I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about today?
No, I think that's it. We can always do a part 2 another time as well.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, and it was super fascinating to hear about because in the U.S. we watch primarily like the big sports are basketball and football. But then I've been to a hockey game and dude, the excitement is fucking insane, So I was really fascinated to hear about your story and thanks again for sharing your experience. And I never knew what a professional hockey player went through, now that I know. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you guys haven't followed already, follow on Spotify, and we're also on Podimo, which is a Norwegian platform here, and also on YouTube. So thanks, guys.